Carlos Sainz's future is with Williams, Sergio Perez is staying at Red Bull, and Alpine has a new team principal. Formula One may be slowing down for the summer break, but the F1 job market has been moving fast. And there are still seats up for grabs, most interestingly at Mercedes. Welcome to the first of our summer break shows. I'm Tom Clarkson. Williams team principal James Vowles will join us very shortly to talk things Carlos Sainz. But first, the 1996 World Champion Damon Hill is here as well. Damon, how are you? What are your reflections of what happened at Spa last week?
Well, they're very positive. I mean, I enjoyed the race thoroughly, and it comes hot on the heels of Hungary, which was also another good race, and you might add Austria as well. And yeah, it was great. I mean, obviously disappointing for George Russell, who sadly was under the weight limit, and it's made a lot of people very confused. It's the first question. I'm interested to see what happens when I do something after a race and I do something and meet people. What sort of questions they ask, and they were all just making references to being 1.5 kilos underweight, you know. And I was checking in my luggage to go to a golf tournament in Scotland, and charity golf tournament. I'm always available for charity golf tournaments if you're interested. But anyway, it was great. It was great to be out there playing golf and meeting all my old mates who I play golf with, and they were all making jokes about my luggage being underweight by 1.5 kilos. So it's a meme, you know. It's suddenly become something that is in people's consciousness, and they're going, well, how can that happen? How can that be? So poor old George, you know, we think he's won the race, and suddenly we find that there's something amiss. So that was tough on him, but it was a great race. Unexpected result either way, whether you call it a win for Lewis or George.
And it smacked of the Belgian Grand Prix 30 years ago, Damon, one that you won after Michael Schumacher had been disqualified for almost the same thing.
Exactly, yeah. I had that experience of thinking I'd come second and went very dejectedly to Brussels airport, and sat in my car and sort of fumed and kind of was a bit stroppy, and then got to the BA lounge in Brussels airport, and Anne Bradshaw, who was the press woman at Williams, came up to me with a big smile and said, "Congratulations." And I went, why the big smiles? You've won the race. I'm sorry, what do you mean? And they'd found that Michael Schumacher's plank was too thin. It obviously worn out. I don't know what the real reason for that was, but anyway, they'd found something on his car that wasn't right, and he was disqualified from the results, giving me the win. And so I was sitting in the airport, and of course, I was actually in Brussels airport again when I found out that George had been disqualified, which is exactly where I found out Michael had been disqualified. So it's something to do with the airport.
I'm just trying to imagine what Lewis Hamilton went through last week when he inherited the win in the same way that you did back in '94. I mean, obviously the euphoria isn't there because, well, it's however many hours after the race. But does it feel like a cheap win if you inherit it like that, or do you? That's
not the way you want it to happen. You know, you want it clean cut. You want it to be undisputed. But the fact is, the cars they have to comply with the regulations, and if they don't, they have to be disqualified, because it's not like you can be given a 10-second penalty, or they can't judge what the value of the irregularity is and apply a penalty like that. It just simply is. This is the simple business of measurement. You know, something is either 1 meter long or it isn't. You know, it can't be about 1 meter long or about 798 kilos. It has to be exactly within the regs. So, yeah. He can consider himself in a very unfortunate club of people who have been disqualified from winning the Belgian Grand Prix, including Michael Schumacher.
Well, let's talk about Carlos Sainz now. He's been linked with lots of teams since losing his Ferrari seat to Lewis Hamilton next season. But Carlos has decided to race for Williams in 2025, 2026 and beyond, according to the team. So let's hear from the man who's managed to secure the Spaniard services. I've been chatting to Williams team principal James Vowles, and he told me how important this signing is for Williams.
One of the best ways I can explain this is through the emotional reaction when I announced in the race base. So there's a little bit on social. I hope there will be anyway. If it's not today, it will be soon. But to set the scene, we set up a sort of projector screen with a TV in there, and I walked in. Netflix was with me as well. About 600 to 700 people, because of shift patterns. You don't get all 1,000 in there at the same time. and introduced you and just said, actually, it's best you watch the screen. Now, I've had the pleasure of winning races and being in part of the race bay element, winning a championship and being in the race bay. I promise you, the emotional reaction to this was the largest I've ever seen in my Formula One career. It was extraordinary. The shouting, screaming. I mean, Carlos did a piece to camera fundamentally that was about maybe probably a minute and a half. They missed the first minute. There was just screaming ongoing in that period of time. And that alone told me what it meant, every one of those individuals that are in there. And then what I've done after that is follow it up by just walking around really and asking people what it means. And the answer is what I hoped it would be, which is it's a statement of intent. It's a very clear statement of intent. There is no doubt now that we are investing at the right level, that we have, in my opinion, one of, if not the best driver lineups in the grid as a combination between the two. There's no politics. They're both just performance machines for all those that know them in detail. And here's the second thing that it really meant to the team. And this for me is the more important one, unbelievably. So Carlos is quick. I knew he was quick from the outset. But he's a performance machine. And what I mean by that is he wants thousands of details to be at the right level for him to perform and give you everything back to the team. He wants the team to improve and be better. I don't think it's a coincidence that every team he's been in has improved in his tenure there. And I can see why after many, many months of talking to him. And what the factory came to the conclusion of, and it's exactly the right conclusion, is this means we've got to step up our game as well. This means that, you know, the fact that sometimes we've ended up with a floor, that's not good enough. It needs 3 floors delivered at the right standards at the right time. We need to bring everything in advance. The performance has to be matching the driver lineup that we have today. And the world knows that. I know that. But you'd be surprising what the resonance of that message means.
You say you've been courting him for many months. I mean, like, how many months? When did you first start the conversation?
It's funny, it was in a talk here, and I said it's a little bit like dating. And then I gave them a comparison to exactly what's been happening. I went, oh my God, it is dating. The first time I met with his family was in Abu Dhabi 2023. And of course, in Abu Dhabi 23, he was already signed, as far as I was aware, to Ferrari. But there's only one driver that I've really spent time properly digging into this level of detail with him, is Carlos. That doesn't mean I wasn't talking to other drivers. I was at different points, but it was very lightweight relative to the amount of discussion we've been having with Carlos. And it's really important to state that. And in 23, the main thing was, I'm here. Here's who I am. This is what I stand for. This is why I believe in the project that we're in at the moment. And I ask of you just to seriously consider it. No one knows what our future holds. I don't know if it'll be 25 we're talking about or 27. But here's who I am, and this is what I stand for, and this is what Williams stands for. And it was a fantastic chat.
James, what triggered those first conversations? Was it that very clever victory in Singapore, or had you had an eye on him before that?
I had an eye on him beforehand. I believe Carlos has improved every year. You go back through his history, he's beaten Lando, he's beaten Charles, he's beaten, at times, Max. So I remember way back in the days when he was in Toro Rosso against Max and looked at the two of them and went, yeah, Max is quick, but don't underestimate the other chap next to him. I'm really impressed with how he's holding up. And it started there. That was the first point I watched him. And then when I watched him really is progress, and when he's in the right state of mind, so that's McLaren for me. And in the second year of Lando, I forget the first year because as far as I go, Lando was basically new to it all. But in the second year, and then watched how his performance evolved at that point, that's where I started to see an individual that when he's comfortable, he's bloody quick. Because perhaps the world didn't realize how quick Lando was at the time, but I knew obviously, of course, from George and how quick George is, and it all interlinks quite well as a result. And then in Ferrari, and watching him race, watching him be intelligent with what he's doing, really brought it to the fore. And for me, when I look at the drivers that really are available on the grid, and there's some that just won't be. The Landos of this world won't be. Piastri won't be. They're locked up at this point in time. But Carlos, maybe, for the right mission, the right journey, the right everything. Yeah, are we going to beat Ferrari? It's unlikely unless we put a big number on the table. But can we beat others? I think we have a chance here. So where it boiled down to is that's why I really put the target on him.
So you meet in Abu Dhabi last year, and then has the conversation been ongoing and constant since then?
It's why I described it as dating. So we had a first coffee, lovely date. Then light texting, as you do, a little bit of flirting, as you do. And then really the conversation after Lewis happened kicked off more in earnest and became more and more intense month by month. So it really went from the point of a few phone calls and a few texts to the last few weeks. We spent some really good evenings together. Whether he was going to be here or not, I didn't care. It was actually opportunities in the evenings. One of them was Austria. We were hidden around in a hotel in Austria, where actually there was a football match ongoing at the time, and sort of had to escape that to go and find just a dining room to go and chat in. And it was just understanding what he's about, what he stands for, who he is, where he is in his career, where he wants to be. And it's just a couple of hours of just really good chats. And the same sort of continued on across Spa, and we're very similar each other. I'm clearly, he's a driver. I'm here to be a team principal. But my point is that performance is the root of what we both know as a language, and it resonated how we both approach it.
How frustrating did it get when he kept refusing to put pen to paper? Because I remember being told the deal was almost done. I think it was Canada the first time. Then we go to Silverstone, and there are similar messages as well. Did you ever lose faith?
No. Deal close to done is a very hard metric, because anything you would have heard would not have been for myself or Carlos. I think it's definitely fair to say that there were moments where he was closer to making a decision, and other moments where situations changed and he moved away from making a decision. I think that's very fair to say. The waves you were feeling are correct, just probably the proximity to ink on paper may not have been. I didn't lose faith. What I did do in the sort of last few, definitely post-Barcelona, is make sure that we had other options, because what I can't leave this team without is to be compromised. And that's the only thing that changed in that period of time. And of course, many of that came out fairly publicly, as always with these things, despite me not saying anything about it. But I have a responsibility towards Williams as a brand and towards the 1,000 people that work here as well at the same time. So I can't be left out to dry if Carlos didn't work out. But what I made abundantly clear to him is, tell me your timings and let me see if I can adjust everything to match to you. And his reasons were somewhat sensible. What he said is, for you, it's obvious, it's Williams. Put yourself in my shoes. I have one of the biggest OEMs in the world, of which my father's had success with. And you can't ignore that. You shouldn't ignore that. I have a team that is won a race more recently than Williams, which is a true statement, and has generally beaten Williams. You can't ignore that either. And actually, we just spend a bit of time in each other's shoes is the best way I can describe it to you, where I showed him a little bit more, which we've never spoken about too much publicly, a little bit more about why I'm confident Williams is on the right pathway back to the front. And he did the same in return as to what are the weaknesses you can see and the strengths elsewhere. And one of the things that resonated with me is we had an honest chat. And what I said to him is, I don't want someone here that just wants to disappear. I want someone here as a part of the long-term vision of what we're doing. I need a leader by my side, by Alex's side. And if that's you, great. And if it's not, let's shake hands and move away. But it's not about the money, and it's not about the, other conditions. And actually what he said is what calmed down myself and everyone around me, which is, I know that if I make a decision without having all of the information and I regret it, we have a problem. So when I make a decision, it has to be 100% committed in that direction. So give me the time to do that.
James, tell me more about your vision, because 12 months ago, or just over, it was Canada. You were saying very publicly that Williams's infrastructure is 20 years behind some of your rivals. What has changed in 12 months? How were you able to convince Carlos that you're now in a position to give him and Alex a competitive car going forward?
I think there's a few things. Our infrastructure is 21 years behind now, but bits of it are changing. So here's what changed. I gave him quite accurate weight figures for where the car is overweight race by race. So he can go back and calculate from that where the car would have been. And for the world, it would have meant we were point scoring at pretty much every race, certainly at the beginning of the year. And that's quite painful for me, but it's also a sign of the performance added to the car. Weight is possible to remove, and we are removing it. It's very hard to add real, tangible aerodynamic performance, and weight is just a function. I've done it 100 times in my career. Add 10 kilos, it's about 3/10. Take off 10 kilos, it's about 3/10. There's no point debating it. It does it every time. And he knows that, and you can see that. So the first and foremost is he put together, okay, this is where you are performance-wise, which allows him a clearer view of where the real performance is of certain elements of things. And that's fairly encouraging. What I also showed him is what we're investing in the future in a lightweight way. I couldn't give him the in-depth of it, but where we're investing, how much we're investing, why we're doing that, what I believe in, how long it would take to come on board. He knew about all the people we're signing. And by the way, there's still more that we haven't announced at the moment. But I took him through all of that, what we're doing, why we're changing what we're changing, why it will take the time it will take, why 24 is more of a compromise. And by the way, 25 is a compromise as well. And that was a difficult position for him because he's hyper competitive and doesn't want to be on the back foot in 25. But here's why 26 is quite exciting. And this is what you have to look forward to. And here's the real key behind it. And it's worth asking him rather than me just telling you. The same message I gave him in Abu Dhabi last year is exactly the same message I gave him 2 weeks ago. Hasn't changed. I'm incredibly straightforward. I will show you everything, warts and all. But that message doesn't migrate depending on where we are. It would always be the same one. And I think that aided him to gain confidence in who I am as an individual and what I stand for.
Because I now think you've got one of the best driver lineups in Formula One. I'm sure you agree. And does that put a lot of pressure on the team now that you've got the drivers, you now have to deliver the car?
Yes, and it's intentional. So obviously, I've said time and time again, we've got various bits, infrastructure changes, transformation, all working in the background with some timelines to them. But it's not just that I think we have one of, if not the best driver lineup on the grid. The reason why I'm uncertain on the one of or the best is I want to see them paired together, see how it all works. But my belief is I've signed between the two of them the right pairing for Williams and two drivers that will put fear into others when they're stood next to them on the grid. That's what I wanted. And yes, it creates pressure. I've created a small nuclear reaction. It's all intentional. And our job now is to make sure that we harness that and we use it to the best of our ability, because we have a responsibility to provide them equipment and a car that is not one that scores 4 points, but one scoring points every weekend and on the right pathway for moving up. And we have some good things coming towards the back end of this year. If they all translate, I think we'll be in a positive situation. And the world may also look at Williams slightly differently on the back end of this year. But as you can see this year, people's updates aren't really doing what they say on the tin. So there's a bit of reticence about where that ends up. But I have two drivers that not just will bring the team forward because they're hyper competitive, but they want to bring the team forward. And that's a large difference. That means that they're prepared to invest their time with others here in order to get ourselves into a better space.
What about 25 then? Is it a transitional year? Is it all about 26, or have you got to start performing immediately?
The best way of summarizing it is, if I have two choices on the table, one is invest in 26, one is invest in 25. Every time I will go for the one that's invest in 26, every time. But fortunately, you don't have to do that. There are bits of the team in the design office, it's a little bit in the aero office as well, where you have to invest in 25 because simply the way the rules are constructed at the moment, you can't operate on 26. So an example of that is until January the 2nd, I can't get the aerodynamic team working on the 2026 car. Not a problem. Working on the 25 car at the moment. We're working on different concepts and designs that will move us forward next year that provide a learning opportunity for 26. So as I've said all the way through, it's not that we're going to drop back to last. That's not what's going to happen. But what we need to be doing is making sure that if a choice is on the table in front of you, 26 is where you put your money and your investments, because that's the one that will make a substantive difference. And others may not be making that trade. Others may be making the trade that's more focused on 25, because I think 25, this is just an opinion, could be one of the best years in Formula One for decades. You've got a number of teams converging together and a number of drivers that are there to fight for it. So I can't wait for it, but that makes it a hard decision, what you do with 25 versus 26.
James, do you have any concerns that it's going to be a difficult transition for Carlos? Because 2024, he's already won a race for Ferrari. He might well win another one in the second half of the year. So he's going from being a race-winning Ferrari driver to a team that currently is at the tail end. Do you think that's hard for a driver to get their head around?
I think you've summarized why the decision took so long, to answer your question. Yes. But I don't see it as any different to the journey I've taken. I went from the front of the grid to the back of the grid with a purposeful decision to do so. But the reward you get from moving that team forward is far greater than the odd win. That's what I would put in return, and I would suggest is where Carlos's head is at as well. He knows what he signed up to. He's not a fool. But he also knows he can make a huge difference. And he's looking forward to that challenge.
Brilliant. Well, it's very exciting times. A quick word on Logan Sargent. Is he going to see out the season with Williams?
As I've said time and time again, I've done everything possible, and I will continue to do so, to give him the platform where he can do so. In other words, I want him to see out the season. I want him. He's a Williams Academy driver. He will remain a Williams Academy driver. We've invested in him. And I don't just mean 2 years of Formula One. I mean also in his F2 career and otherwise. And we have a responsibility towards him as well. He deserves to be a professional driver. He's one of the 20 best Formula One drivers in the world. Start there. As long as he earns it, he has a seat, and he has to earn it. And I would say that the blunt truth behind it, which I provided him as well, is Silverstone and Budapest. Good job. He really did move forward. You can see he's seconds off Alex, and Alex is faster than people think. But in Spa, we weren't there. And we have to understand why together, what's different, and will it apply to future races? And that's the blunt truth behind it. And many will take objection at this level of what I call brutal honesty on things. But I much rather that he is given every opportunity but knows where he has to improve, rather than a decision gets made from one day to the next without any influence from inside.
James, it's been fascinating to chat. Thank you for explaining everything to us. What does the summer break look like for you now? Are you able to down tools, or are you going to be working throughout?
There will always be phone calls. So what happens pretty much with Team Principals, just to give you an outline of it, is we all get into our respective positions. It doesn't matter if it's on a beach or in the sea or at home reading a book. And then we get bored about 4 days in. So what do? You call your mates and you find out what they're up to, and then you talk business. So let's see what happens. But there hasn't been an August break where I haven't had a phone call or two. So I'm fairly sure it will continue that way.
James, you deserve a good break. Well done on getting Carlos. And we'll see you in Zandvoort. Thank you very much. Good to chat.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much.
Well, that was absolutely fascinating, Tom. Quite a few things to take from that. It's the effect of Carlos, announcing Carlos to the team, the galvanizing and uplifting effect of that. He described it as being almost euphoric, to know that they've got a driver who's actually been out there. He's got gravitas, Carlos, and I think that's what people sense about him. He's a hard worker as well. I know him and his dad quite well, and they are serious people. They're not people who take Formula One as a kind of a jolly. Carlos works at it and he delivers. I'm looking at an Instagram post from F1, and it's called Average Finishing Positions, and I presume it's from the beginning of this season. The average finishing position this season, Verstappen is 2.4, so finishing second and a half, and then right behind him is Carlos Sainz. So Carlos usually gets the most he can out of a weekend. So no doubt that James will have got all the data on Carlos's performance, and then it was talking about his personality and how they have this burgeoning relationship, which sounded a bit odd, taking him for a coffee and then having another lovely evening with him, because he's his boss. So it's going to be tough. But the dynamic, how it would work with Alex, that is also really important. Putting two people together who work together in a team like Williams at the stage they are now. You need those guys to work together. And I think they are a perfect combination. I can see these two. They're both pretty grown up individuals and competitive and hard workers. So I think they'll complement each other brilliantly.
It's going to be an interesting dynamic, that, isn't it? In that, Alex Albon for the last couple of years now has been the team leader at Williams. And I think Carlos Sainz will think he's coming into Williams as the number one driver,
Okay, they've obviously must have taken a big financial investment to get him, but I don't think he'll come into the team presuming or wanting to be treated as the number one. I don't see that as part of his personality. I think he'll want fair and equal, nothing less than whatever the other bloke's getting, but I doubt whether he'll want to have superiority over Alex. I don't think that would sit well with him. I'd be surprised if that's in the contract. I mean, for example, Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost, they only ever said in their contract that they'll get not less than equal equipment to their teammate.
Is that a Williams thing, though? Damon, you know the team well. A lot of the people there now were there in your day. Is that the Williams way? It's all about equal equipment, not number one, number two.
Very interesting, which is that Williams have to detach themselves from their past. They have to start afresh. Really, they've been in decline for so long. that really there's nothing much left of the remnants of that team. There'll be people there who've been there for a very long time, yes, and they'll remember the days when I was there and Nigel was there and the glory days. But, they'll be a bit older now. A lot of them retired. The ship of Theseus, that metaphor, which is, it's the ship that was preserved by the Athenians, I think. And every year they kept on replacing a plank because it got rotten or something. And after a bit, there'd be replaced so many planks. It's Theseus's ship, and they revered it. Except, of course, every time they repaired it, there was less of the original ship there, until eventually you have to decide at what point is it the original ship. And that's sort of what you got with Williams. James is trying to reinvent it. It's not going to be the same team that I raced for. There's way more. There's 600, 700 people working there. It's a completely different dynamic.
Okay, so he's in the throes of rebuilding the team. He makes reference in that conversation to something he said in Canada last year about the team's facilities being out of date. He said they're now 21 years. I mean, he's joking because they're obviously investing heavily with what they can within CapEx. But I feel that the team is in a period of transition. And by having Albon and Sainz there, they are really raising the expectation level now in terms of performance. And is the team in a position to give the performance yet? And that's the nuclear reaction, I suppose, James is referring to.
Because someone gets great results, and Carlos was in Ferrari, and they gave him opportunities to get great results. You can't just plug a driver into a team and then they get great results. It's going to take a lot of work. But they are reorganising. They are definitely... I get the sense that James he's had to go right back to, the bare brick of it, and he's going to eventually, if you were likening it to a house renovation, he's had to strip it all out and just start again and put all new plumbing in and everything and new wiring and then a nice flock wallpaper or something like that. No, I've gone too far with the metaphor, but you know what I'm saying. But anyway, eventually they'll put the finishing touches to it and it'll look lovely.
And, Doralton have owned Williams since 2020. And the fact that James Vowles has got his man, I think will really impress them. He could have gone to Alpine. He could have gone to Audi, and he's chosen them.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's some solidity there. There's a foundation, and maybe you could say that is the foundation of the name Williams. I mean, Doralton bought it because it has heritage. It also has a place in Formula One that is bolted on, and they're part of the franchise, if you want to call it. They've got a real place there. But I think that Doralton went and found James, and they tempted him to go there. So, who is the motivator behind this? If you're building, it's okay to buy a team, but you've got to know how to build a team and make it stronger. And they're employing all the right people, years and years of experience. I was chatting with Jack Villeneuve in the Williams motorhome, and James came past, and he was making some joke about 2 world champions or something. And Jack said something like, how many world championships have you won? And he basically said, I don't want to even tell you. So he's been there. He knows what it's like at the sharp end. So he's not got the rose-tinted glasses about Formula One.
Damon, there's the question I asked James at the end there about how difficult it's going to be for Carlos to get his head around going from, a red car at the front of the grid to a Williams that potentially will be at the back of the grid. I mean, you went through that yourself, jumping from 96 to 97, your championship year to Arrows in 97. Is it difficult for a driver to get his head around that? Because Carlos is sort of going to be living the experience that you had.
Yeah, he's had to, from the moment it was announced that Lewis was going to Ferrari and Carlos was losing out, I mean, he's had to grapple with that realisation and the reality of that. And so I think he's probably got over that. That's part of being a sports person, is you realise that there are snakes as well as ladders, and sometimes you slide down and you got to now find another ladder to climb, and that's what they're doing at Williams. If it doesn't work out, Carlos is only turning 30 soon, so I mean, I think Carlos has still got a lot of value to any team at the sharp end. So yeah, I think he's got a lot of opportunities. It's the musical chairs. Unfortunately, that's what it is. Eventually it will be, well, I mean, maybe Lewis will retire. Maybe he'll do 2 years at Ferrari and retire, and then Carlos might get another stab at that one.
This is an advertisement from BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip a leg day or therapy day. We're all busy. When your days are packed with doing things with your family or friends or work, it can be easy to let other priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. And when you feel like you have no time for yourself, something like therapy is more important than ever. Therapy can help anyone. It helps you understand yourself and to find ways of coping with things you find difficult. It can change your outlook and help you be the best version of yourself. BetterHelp has almost 5,000 therapists in the UK already, mental health professionals with a wide variety of expertise. Visit betterhelp.com/F1Nation today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/F1Nation. Let's talk about Red Bull. There was a big meeting the day after the Belgian Grand Prix, the conclusion of which was that Sergio Perez will stay at Red Bull for the rest of this season, despite a lot of uncertainty surrounding his future. I mean, pressure has been building on Perez after a run of 9 races without a podium. His last podium was in China, and that's seen him drop to P8 in the drivers' standings. He's 146 points behind Max Verstappen, and I think crucially in the Constructors' Championship, Red Bull are now just 42 points clear of McLaren. So, I mean, Damon, we've been at the races. We've seen Perez struggle. And I'm sure that the big bosses at Red Bull are looking at the start of this year. I mean, Bahrain, Checo's P2 on the podium. Saudi, next race, he's P2. Australia is a bit of an outlier, but then we go to Japan, he's P2 again. China, the next race, he's P3. So he was banging in those results early on, proving that he can do it. And, even in Miami, he was finishing P4. So I think, as Christian Horner has been saying all year, there is a desire to get Checo back where they know he can be, and it's just a question of unplugging that performance. And maybe there's a hope that if he goes back to Mexico for a month over this summer break, recharges, comes back refreshed, and he can go to Zandvoort with a renewed energy and a renewed focus, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that would certainly be good. And I did say, I think in a couple of episodes back, that they really ought to be focusing a lot more on Checo and finding out what it is that the problem is, so that he can get the best out of the car, that he can get the confidence of its confidence, whatever it is, because they need him. And if they can't exchange him for another driver. I mean, there have been experiences in the past where they've made a declaration that whoever it was, Gasly or whoever was staying, or Albon, I can't remember, and then suddenly that all changed quickly. So things do happen. And, maybe they might bite the bullet and say, we're going to lose the Constructors' Championship. What is that worth to us in millions of dollars? And if we front up some millions of dollars for Checo to go somewhere else, then it's worth it in the long run. So you don't know.
I wonder if you've hit the nail on the head there, Damon, where, the moment they lose the lead in the Constructors' Championship, and let me repeat, they're only 42 points clear of McLaren as we speak. Maybe that will be the catalyst for movement. And I feel that Daniel Ricciardo is getting better ever since Canada. He had that great weekend in Canada. Okay, Silverstone wasn't so good, but what we're actually seeing is a more consistent Daniel Ricciardo. He's got the profile, he's got the victories. It's, if they're going to make a change with Perez, whether it's, some point between now and the end of the year or for 2025, Ricciardo is the easiest sell, if you like, both internally and externally, as to why you're bringing him back to the team. And then that would, of course, allow Liam Lawson, their third driver, reserve driver, to step in alongside Yuki. But, Damon, it does raise this question. What has Yuki Tsunoda got to do to get the credibility that he thinks he deserves? He's been consistent this year. He's been quick. And yet he's never been part of the conversation. If I
was him, I'd be on the phone to Aston Martin now, because he's Japanese and they got Honda engines coming.
Because you think he just will never get the credibility he deserves within Red Bull?
I mean, he's right in saying that I can't understand it, doesn't make any sense. But, you know, when you see pictures of Max leaving the circuit in a helicopter with Danny Ricciardo and they're all smiles, you kind of get the feeling that Danny Rick and Max would be quite happy with Danny Rick as a teammate. And so if his power is such in that team that he can almost influence that decision, then I do think the pressure is on to get Danny in there. And they've given him a second lease of life, you know, by encouraging him, and his performances have been getting stronger. There's no question about it. But you know, it just makes you realise that these cars, something about these cars, it is extremely difficult for drivers to express themselves, because it's not just him, it's Checo as well, and other drivers. Even Lewis says, you know, that the window of optimising the car is so small that, you know, drivers can get confused with this, and if their driving style doesn't suit the parameters of the car and the tyres, then you can get a big drop off in performance, and it makes them look very bad. But actually, it might just be something that they don't understand about the car, and it could be the team isn't helping them find that thing. And yeah, so how do we judge drivers' ability? I've just been saying that, you know, Carlos is, you know, second in the average results of the season. I think Carlos understands his car. I think he understands how to make it work. He understands the tactics as well. He's quite often calling the shots on the radio. This is the level that every other driver needs to get to be able to give themselves better results. And that's also part of being a racing driver. It's no longer just whether you've got talent and can go fast.
And do you agree with James Vowles that Carlos, on his day, is the second fastest driver in Formula One after Max Verstappen?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Carlos is regarded as being the lightning quick driver, and I think that's shown up by when Charles has gone for the special lap. You know, he can put a tenth or two on Carlos Sainz, but over a season, I think Carlos Sainz is probably delivering on average closer to his maximum potential than some of the others who maybe blow hot and cold sometimes. So yeah, I mean, I think there was an element of, obviously, you know, James has made the decision and he's now convincing himself that it's absolutely the right decision, and it is a good result for him, you know, to get Carlos Sainz there. But who is the quickest driver in Formula 1? Max Verstappen, you know, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton. I think George is there from time to time, Lando and Oscar. You know, there are a lot of very quick guys out there, but definitely Carlos can hold his own in there. Checo's forte used to be really his race results. You know, he wasn't, I don't think, a lightning quick qualifier, but he really used to deliver the results, which is why I'm so surprised by where he is now.
So Damon, 10 races to go. Do you think Red Bull will win the Constructors' Championship?
I can see it being very difficult for them to hold McLaren back. We've got a lot of races to go yet, and they've come into the sweet spot. And also, you've got Mercedes now coming on song as well. So I think they're going to be slimmer pickings for constructors' points for Red Bull.
Right, Damon, let's get back to the F1 job market. Let's move to Alpine. Of course, announced over the Belgian Grand Prix weekend that Bruno Famin is standing down at the end of August as team principal, and he is going to be replaced by Oliver Oakes, the founder of F2, F3 team High-Tech. Now, Oliver is 36 years old. This will make him the second youngest team principal in Formula One history, after Christian Horner, who was 31 back in 2005 when Red Bull came in. So, Damon, let me tell you what I know about Oliver Oakes. He is a former racing driver. He won the karting World Championship back in 2005, in which actually he beat Valtteri Bottas, among others. He has been a very successful team owner of High-Tech Pulsate in F2, F3 and other junior formulas. They do a lot in Asia as well. And actually he knows a lot of the young drivers on the cusp of Formula One. Jack Doohan, George Russell, Liam Lawson, they have all raced for High-Tech in the junior formulas. So he has pedigree both as a driver and as a team principal, if you like, of a front-running team in the junior formulas. Quite why Alpine have chosen him to become their new team principal, we would need to ask them. But he definitely has pedigree. And I like the fact that they've gone for a young guy.
So would this have been a Flavio appointment then?
Well, he is the executive advisor now, and it seems more and more that he is calling the shots within the team. I thought it was interesting that in the press release that the team put out about Oliver Oaks, that Flavio was quoted, as was Luca De Meo, the Renault CEO. So this is a decision that's been made at the very top with Luca, but I would imagine very much pushed through by Flavio. I mean, Flavio as a team principal, I don't know whether he ever tried to court you in the way that James Vowles did with Carlos Sainz, but
it was slightly different. He didn't take me for coffee. He took me out to a nightclub in Paris.
He was trying to woo you to drive for Benetton back in the day. I think I was trying to woo
him, but it didn't really come off. We never met again, I think.
But sort of my memories of Flavio are that he did things differently in terms of he was very much a marketeer. He'd come from Benetton clothing company and held his hand up and said, I don't understand how to organize a racing team. And he needed people around him who knew about racing. And I think Oliver Oaks knows about racing. He's proved that in F2, F3, etc. over the last 10 years or so. So he can give Flavio, if you like, what he doesn't, even after all these years in Formula 1, what he doesn't have. And maybe Bruno Famin, who's, an engineer by trade and doesn't have that much F1 experience, maybe he wasn't getting that from Bruno, which is why he sought someone with racing pedigree.
My take and my opinion, which is gleaned purely from just looking at this whole story of Renault's attempts to make things work in F1 with their own team, is that when you employ someone from the team company itself, they've got other considerations to take on board. And I don't think they're able to see clearly or act clearly enough in the way that you need to when you're in Formula One. And I think someone like Ollie Oaks is the ideal candidate to run a Formula One team. He wants to win. He's a winner. He's a racer. He's got his own race team. He understands what racing is. He'll understand immediately. And I know nothing about the guy other than the fact that if he's run at High Tech, a team as successful as that, and he's been there and he understands the way it works. He's like Christian. He'll be like Christian. He understands racing. And I think that Flavio, he also understands this. He doesn't understand cars. So he's found someone who can do that. And that's the genius. So a bit like Bernie, the story of Bernie going into Brabham when he first got there, and he got shown around by Ron Taranek, and Ron Taranek pointed at Gordon Murray and said, everyone else is good, set that bloke in the corner. So Bernie sacked everyone except Gordon Murray. And of course, they understand something. And I think Flavio understands what he doesn't understand. And so he gets someone he knows racing, and the people that he had run the team, he let them run the team. He did the deals. That was his forte. He understood the money and the operating and what those people needed. They needed money so they could develop, have a wind tunnel or whatever it was, or the latest thing. And he'd go and find the money for them and just say, here's the money, now deliver the results.
All right. And what about the second drive there now? Pierre Gasly has been confirmed for 2025. There's been a lot of speculation about who will be his teammate. Carlos Sainz was being wooed by Flavio, no doubt about that. But of course, with Carlos no longer available, the guy in pole position is Jack Doohan, son of MotoGP legend Mick Doohan. Jack has a great record in the junior formulas. He's doing a lot of running in Alpine's 2-year-old car. He's been at Zandvoort this year. He's been to Imola. He was testing at Spa 2 days after the Belgian Grand Prix last week. So they're really investing in him. And it seems that he is the guy in pole position, yeah. Jack,
I think, is a very professional driver. I think he's acquitted himself well. He's shown he can race. He's smart and inquisitive. He seems to be there asking all the questions and, doing the groundwork with the team. So, yeah, I think he'll be an interesting guy to give a crack to, definitely. I mean, he's yet to have proven credentials in F1, not like Ollie Behrman, who's jumped in the car and done a race, but I think a lot of these guys now are capable. They're so well prepared that I don't think they'll have a problem when they get to F1.
And that performance by Ollie Behrman at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix earlier this year, I think, has really helped all the other guys he raced in F2, because if you could go toe-to-toe with Ollie Behrman in F2 and you can see what he's done when he was parachuted into a Ferrari on Saturday morning, then, hey, why can't Jack Doohan do exactly the same?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I mean, when I was coming up through the ranks, there was Johnny Herbert and there was Martin Donnelly who all got their cracks at it, and I remember thinking, well, I used to race against those. I used to beat them sometimes, So it did make you think more positively about your ability to cope with F1 if you ever got there.
There are still seats to be confirmed at Mercedes, Sauber and VCARB. It seems as if Kimi Antonelli is now the clear favourite to replace Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes. His Formula 2 season has taken off since Silverstone. He won the sprint race at Silverstone. He then won brilliantly in Hungary. He won the feature race. So he's getting his head around F2. He's going to do more and more running in Mercedes' 2-year-old car. So would you agree with me that Kimi Antonelli seems to be the guy now?
I think he's showing signs of the brilliance that they keep talking about, and they obviously have upped the rhetoric on Kimi Antonelli, and we were struggling to see what they were talking about, I have to say, early on. I mean, the team he's with, Premier, they haven't got their car sorted, so he's been finding it difficult, as has Ollie Behrman, to compete in F2, but then he's put in a couple of really good performances recently, and I didn't see it, but I think that in the sprint race which they ran for only 7 laps or something at Spa, I think he pulled off a bit of a move which everyone was talking about, which I haven't seen yet, which I'd like to see. But when you get those little frissons of pundits saying, "Oh, well, did you see that? That was pretty impressive," then you know that he's starting to mature and show this form, this talent that we've heard so much about. Yeah, definitely think give him another half season or something, and he'll be 17, will he? A whole 17.
No, he'll be a whole 18.
Oh, good.
A whole 18 at the end. Yeah, and he turns 18 at the end of this month, actually. I mean, there is still the shadow of Max Verstappen. I think Toto Wolff, boss of Mercedes, still hasn't completely given up on the thought of having Verstappen in one of his cars next year. But all the messaging we're getting from Red Bull, and actually from Max, is that Max will be at Red Bull for 2025, and who are we to question what Max is saying if that's what he's saying publicly?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it'd be there for 25, but I think he can wait and see more clearly. I think 26 is definitely up for grabs,
and he'll see what Red Bull powertrains are doing with their power unit. This time next year, he'll then go and see what Mercedes high performance engines are doing in Brixworth with theirs, and he'll have the numbers in front of him to be able to make the right call for 2026. We have discussed VCARB earlier in the show. So look, finally, what about Sauber? They were really hoping that they were going to get Sainz. Obviously, they haven't. They already have Nico Hülkenberg in one of their cars next year. I think there's nothing wrong with the incumbent. I think Valtteri Bottas is having his best season with Sauber so far, and I think him and Hülkenberg, in what will probably continue to be a difficult car next year, I think will help them maximise what they've got, and both have huge experience in terms of building for the future as well. So watch that space with Sauber. Now, Damon, you'll be delighted to know that there are no podium predictions to make this week, so all that remains to be said is thanks to you for your input, as ever.
Thank you very much for having me again, Tom. It's always lovely to chat.
And thank you to James Vowles, of course, for coming on F1 Nation as well. Great to get his thoughts. And remember, everyone, you can still get to a race this season. Tickets for the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort, plus the US Grand Prix in Austin, Las Vegas, and the rest of the 2024 calendar are all on sale now. Just go to tickets.formula1.com. Damon and I will be back next Monday to reflect on the season so far and discuss whether McLaren can challenge Max Verstappen and Red Bull for both World Championships in the final 10 races. Thank you as ever for listening. F1 Nation is produced by Formula One and Audio Boom Studios.